We're going to call to order the Board of Finance meeting for tonight, Tuesday, February 27th.
And I'll call to order the Board of Selectmen.
And let us begin by the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. First Selectman, the floor is yours.
Thank you, everybody. Purpose tonight is to present the results of the Board of Selectmen's deliberation and vote, which occurred yesterday. And I want to begin with a couple of comments. I've left some comments in writing as an introduction to the budget discussion, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but just a few things that I would like to point out. The most important parts. Bethel is a community that's growing, and we're lucky we're growing. In a state that has had an awful lot of bad news over the past few years, a lot of challenges, has lost businesses, has lost population. Bethel really kind of stands out. There are very few towns that can say this. We are a town that is desirable, it's affordable, it's growing. Our population has changed by a little bit more than 5.5% since the last census in 2010, and continues to grow. As Dr. Carver pointed out in her submission, in the budget presentation, that's reflected in the school numbers, which are not rising drastically, but easily settling in at a few more students every month, it would seem. And this is reflected in some of the budget drivers that we see. The population who lives in Bethel, a lot of people moving in, are putting a strain on services. And when I say that, I mean mostly right here in Town Hall. When you look at the workload that the staff has to perform every day to meet constituent needs, the health department, the building department, the land use department. Basically, those departments have not changed appreciably in the last 10 to 15 years. I think we've added like a grand total of about 1.5 FTEs or full-time equivalents. We have a couple years ago, we added a part-time zoning inspector. We took the assessor's office. There was one position that was a part-time clerk. We moved that to full-time. And of course, we moved the social services director from part-time to full-time last year. Other departments that are really seeing a lot of increased workload, number one is the health department. Building department has asked for head count. The police department put together a very strong case for needing 2 officers. And when you look at the statistics that they're able to use now, look at the data, you can see that the workload and we are not experiencing a crime wave. I want to make sure that everybody understands that. In fact, we were just listed by a national organization as the 15th safest town in Connecticut. So we have an excellent force that's doing a great job. But when you look at the calls for service, when you look at the number of petty crimes, things that they have to deal with, and of course our police officers are the first responders, and they have special training for that. You can see that the workload continues to go up in a lot of areas, and that's something that's very important. And we did not, the Selectmen did not try to deal with all of that at one time. When we looked at those budget requests, we had, I think, almost a 5% increase had we dealt with all of them, and that is certainly unrealistic, especially when considering the challenges and the uncertainty that the state budget is presenting, because we don't really know what the revenue is going to be. We have to make some educated guesses on the conservative side, assume that the state aid is going to be lower rather than higher, and proceed from that point of view. A couple other things. I want to point out that the staff, especially the finance department, has worked very hard over the past couple of years to control costs, and we have some real successes. I appointed Mr. Kozlowski the chief negotiator with our labor contracts, largely just to get me out of it because I'm so busy doing other things, but we do work as a team, but he's the lead. So we have, over the past 2 years, moved all of our employees to either the partnership plan for health insurance, which is the Connecticut state plan, which was very significant savings, A couple other bargaining units are on high deductible insurance. That has lowered healthcare costs. The new solar farm, we just got numbers just yesterday morning that will reduce our electricity costs by $34,000 in the very first year of operation. We signed up with Eversource's plan to replace all streetlights with LEDs. We don't know what the savings is on that, but it should be considerable. That was $100,000 a year line item in the budget, and we expect to see some very significant savings. I can pass that along as I get it, but for now, we left it in as $100,000, but expecting that to be a little bit of a surplus when we get into it. I want to point out also that one of the most important things we did, which is kind of a tough thing to do, it requires a long-term commitment. A few months ago, we named Mr. Hearing the risk manager, along with his other duties as the deputy comptroller. His job is to assess risk in all forms, job-related risk, cybersecurity risk, risk of liability, looking at the town's insurance needs and working with the insurance and pension commissions to make sure that all risk that we can identify is adequately covered. But the most important part is to proactively assess possible risks and take steps to mitigate them before they occur. So I'm very pleased. So it's the biggest one that we've had over the past number of years. One of the biggest cost drivers we had in our previous year's budgets was liability insurance, and especially workers' compensation insurance. For many years, we had very high claims in workers' comp, and over the past year, and Brad was doing this along with all of our department heads. I want to give them full credit for, especially Public Works, Water, Utilities Department, Park and Recreation, and Highway Department, have been very proactively looking at safety procedures, having experts come in, sitting through webinars to learn new safety procedures. And I'm very pleased to say that because of that proactive work, KERMA, our insurance carrier, has given us a 0 increase this year. That's the first time in probably 2 decades, ever probably, that we've achieved that. And our goal next year is to actually have a decrease in workers' comp. So those are a couple of significant things that we're doing and continue to do. We have negotiations coming up this year. There's one in process now, another major one coming up, and we will always be looking at ways to treat our employees fairly, but also give our taxpayers a break and reach a mutual understanding along that line. I think we've had a very good track record in doing so. Just a couple of words on the capital side. We're experiencing the same kinds of pressures. When Mr. Kozlowski and I started working together 8 years ago now, at that time, the town did not have a long-term capital plan at all. So in the first couple of years, we together created a 5-year capital plan and then quickly expanded it to a 10-year capital plan. So every year we moved the capital plan out and just add more to it. The problem that I see, we're not going to solve it tonight. We're not going to solve it in this budget year. But in the first couple of years of the capital plan, we went along fine. But then as these, what we do is we try to project out how long are those 1994 Ford F8000 snowplows going to last? How much longer is a 20-year-old fire truck going to last? How much longer is the street sweeper that was built in 2002 going to last? And they get beat up a lot. And we found that these, and we are finding now, I don't want to use the past tense because it's something that we're going to have to deal with as a team. We're finding that these capital needs, it's like pouring a pile of sand on the table, and as you move it like this, it starts to pile up. We're starting to see some needs really build up because we're pushing things off to try to control costs, and that's going to be something we're going to have to look at in the future. So specifically, the first capital request, when we totaled them all up, came to $10.2 million. And that is just too much money to borrow. And I know that this board has set a goal, which we all share, of reducing debt, especially short-term debt, and not relying on the credit card to get things done. So you will see when we go through the capital thing that the capital requests were pared down from 10.2 to 2.1 million, or 2.2 million, excuse me. A large number of the capital items, things that used to be put on the capital list for short-term notes, have been moved from the capital list into capital non-recurring. And for those in the audience who don't know what that is, that's part of the regular operating budget. It's a capital account that you can roll over from year to year. So we have a schedule of pulling things out of the capital request list, moving them into capital non-recurring, both for the current fiscal year that we're in right now, as well as for next year. In long term, I think one of the goals that we need to establish is to put more money in those capital accounts so it stays steady in the operating budget and it doesn't become a shock that you have to deal with every year. However, that does leave over $7 million of requests, valid requests, that were not dealt with in this year, that we don't recommend, that the Board of Selectmen did not pass along. So they've been pushed into future years, and we'll have to deal with those. Overall, the budget submission that we have tonight is a conservative one. The overall budget, town, Board of Ed maintenance, and debt load combined is $74,334,524. That represents a 1.875 increase over the prior year. That does not take into account revenue, and I know we're going to talk about that as we go through this over the next few weeks. But we feel that that is a conservative budget that addresses most of our needs. But there's still some departments that are going to be, well, I noticed a few people stopped waving at me when I drove home the other night. The town budget alone is a 2.34% increase. Board of Ed, there was a minor change taken out of that last night, so that remains a 1.8% increase. Board of Ed maintenance has a 6% decrease. That goes from $532,108 down to $500,008. And then debt service is a 0.87% increase. So that is the budget overview. I have provided, I thought you might want to do some things differently this year. So rather than just automatically go line by line through the budget or department by department, we provided you summaries of, summary sheets of what those changes are. And I'll leave it up to you to, if you want to go through those departments or simply ask questions based on the presentations that you've seen over the last 2 weeks. So I'll leave that question to the chair.
Sure.
Does anyone have a preference? My suggestion would be to just go through each department very quickly and just keep it sequential, Matt.
Okay.
Does that sound right for people?
That's fine.
Okay.
Deanne, do you have the summary sheet?
Oh, here's the next one.
Okay, Selectmen's office, no change from what was presented. Treasurer's office, no change. We'll go through the easy ones first, because that just, there's not much to them. Finance department, there was a $3,500, a little bit more than $3,500 reduction, and that is just, we're just gonna tell the auditor he can't charge us more next year. The next departments, town clerk, assessor, tax collector, professional services, and probate office, no change from what was submitted. And those are either flat or very minor upward adjustments on those. Any questions so far? Okay, next one is, this is a department that is gonna not be happy with me very much for the next year. The building department, building inspection department has seen in the last 8 years a tremendous increase in the workload. And you can just see that around town with the number of residential projects that are underway, plus a few commercial projects. Not only is the number of building permits and the number of engineering reviews that they have to do, have they gone up, but they're a lot more complicated. The police station, for example, we actually had to farm out parts of that inspection, because if we did it in-house, it would have taken 7 months to get the plans reviewed. That's how complicated these are. So some of the big Toll Brothers developments in town require a lot of resources. The building inspector, the chief building inspector, asked for a $20,000 increase in his budget for a part-time clerk to try to move the paperwork faster, and unfortunately, we had to not give him that help that he needs. There was no reduction overall, but we didn't give him the increase. Data processing, otherwise known as IT, we will change that word sometime. That shows an increase, and we left it as is, and that is a increase in licensing fees across the board. Last year, we had to do a major upgrade in the Windows operating systems for security purposes. And by the way, some of you were on the board some years ago when I first mentioned this. When Mr. Kozlowski and I started working together in 2010, our finance system had no firewall at all. It was absolutely wide open, and fortunately nobody noticed. But we have instituted a number of cybersecurity safeguards. We put our employees through cybersecurity training. We train employees how to identify what might be a spoof email and to check it out before they click it and before they open anything in it. And we do send out irregularly, so people don't get used to it, we send out phony emails to test them. And the ones who fail get more training. So that's part of the risk reduction thing that we do too. But aside from that, there are many different software packages that we use for the assessor's office, utilities, tax collector's office, finance. And unfortunately, those are very highly specialized software packages. And it's not like going down and trading in for a different software. You have to pay the licensing fee, and when the cost goes up, you got to pay it. So there is an increase in that department, and we left that as it was requested. Social services, there was a slight increase there. We left that request as presented. Town insurance, and I've already mentioned to you that we had a 0% increase there, so that stays intact. And that's a really good win for us, and I want to compliment the finance department on the work they've done. Because in the past, we've seen increased demands upwards of 25 to 30% on a bill that's over $1 million. So this is it's really starting to pay off, which is just in time. Fleet maintenance, slight increase there. We left that as is. Public Works. This is another department where we really do need some help, but we're not going to provide it this year. We took out $2,500 for the intern. We reduced $5,000 from contracted services for consulting. So we're going to be squeezing some of the engineering consulting that we do and doing more of it in-house to the greatest degree that we possibly can. And in Department 240 Highway, there was a reduction of $100,000 for road construction. If you remember, for years we had the number for road construction at about $500,000. And then we moved it last year to $600,000. We had originally proposed, the department had proposed moving it up to $800,000, so putting a $200,000 increase in that line. And we feel that it's very important to move the highway construction number up so that we're not borrowing money to do roads. There's a point, we had to do that. We're not unlike any other town in Connecticut coming out of the big recession after 2008, 2009. Towns, cities across the state, probably almost all of them, borrowed pretty heavily to get caught up because their roads had fallen into disrepair, and they were looking at big numbers to get them caught up. So we borrowed and probably doubled to maybe 2x, 2.5x more than usual in the roads to get that caught up, and now we're easing that back. And we think that the number we need to be is probably around $900,000 to just keep that in the budget and keep it adjusted with inflation so that the highway department can maintain those roads that they just built. Because over the past 8 years, we've built 40 miles or so worth of brand new roads. And those are quality roads, full depth reconstruction, new drainage. They'll last a long time. So now we just need to keep that budget intact. So the selectmen decided to take $100,000 out. We're still moving it from 600 to 700. So hopefully we can move it up another 100,000 next year and so on. Yes, Brian?
Could we just ask?
Sure. Anytime.
I'll stick with this one first. Do we have any money left over from the money we borrowed last year that could supplement road construction this year? Or are we gonna?
Not all the bills are in right now, even though the paving season ended back in December. There's always problems with the bills, so we send them back and they have to redo them. So we won't know that probably until at least April.
We think there is,
Right.
but we don't know what
We
it is.
think.
I'm not sure how much is gonna be left over.
And this
I don't
highway,
think there's gonna be much.
will we be able to finish? I know it was a 5-year plan.
Yeah.
Are we gonna be able to finish it with the 700,000 if there's not the money? Or can you come back if we have
Well-
money in capital non-reoccurring?
We might have to come back if we wanted to finish it, because if you remember Mr. Dibble's presentation, we had 800 in there, and he wanted 850. He wanted 850.
That's the number we always talked about.
Right. That's,
My next question is, just quickly on Public Works.
yes.
We've always been over on contracted services,
Mhm.
and we're gonna remove 5,000 from it. I mean, is it a real cut, and is it a wise cut, considering we're over, the past few years, we've been over substantially in contracted services? I mean, am I right? I'm pretty sure that's a
It's
lot.
come down substantially over the last 3 years, I would say, but we still are over in that account.
So maybe we just make a note of that for when we
I
go
think
into
there's some
budget.
plans with possibly doing some of that work in-house.
Yes.
We need a professional engineer,
Mhm.
and I believe he's sitting for the exam, so if he
Mhm.
can, he can do that type of work for us next year,
Mhm.
and that will cut a lot of the contracted services out.
Mhm.
All right, we just make a note for tomorrow.
Okay.
And at the same
Yeah.
time, we still have the utility director that's PD, so
Oh, he's able to take some of that
Well,
workload that used to go out?
it's a decision that we have to make in the future.
Yeah, he's technically on the other side of the fence, he's on the utility side, but, there are some salary sharing positions similarly in town hall where people cross over and their salaries are accounted for in each department. So we're gonna look at, basically, it's an opportunity for regional efficiency or an internal efficiency to make that happen, so that's what we're gonna try to do. Try to save some money that way.
All right.
Okay.
I
Yes.
just have a question that, I have questions as we go along, but I was thinking that we would, because rather than stopping, because
What-
I've got questions.
Whatever you want.
Why don't we do questions by department?
Yeah.
So-
okay.
I think it just makes it, the
Well, I
reason
mean,
why,
we
it's
just
just
went
we're on
through
Public
the
Works,
process.
that's what I was thinking.
That's
It's just
fine.
easier,
Yeah, please.
that way we're close.
Well, then, I can go back to the building department.
Sure.
So, first of all, I just want to say, I was pleasantly surprised at a lot of the slimming down of that budget last night. I thought it was really good. And the choices that you made were really good. Now, the part-time clerk thing, I know you didn't give that to him.
Cynthia, I'm sorry, which department? I just want to
Oh,
follow.
I'm sorry,
Building.
building inspection.
180, got it, thank you.
There are some of these positions that, like, for example, Chris said that he wanted to digitize and, various things. And so, again, and, Dr. Carver's here, couldn't this be married into some, like a pathway project or something that involved, students who, maybe they want to go into government, I don't know why, but, to do some of these things. And then that doesn't,
Yeah.
that's part of the thing, and I just want to put that out there because he didn't get this.
Yes.
And there are ways maybe to affect that,
Yeah, it's
like a
not.
civics thing.
Right, it's not out of the question, and I don't know how much he talked about it, but he has been working, since we hired him a year ago in December, he's been working on an online permitting system, which is step one in improving efficiency and turnaround time, but step two is digitizing all the old stuff.
Mhm.
And that's gonna require somebody to be there, like, scanning things in, taking apart the old files, so it's certainly
Right,
possible.
because I'm thinking that
Yeah.
a high school student would probably know
Yeah.
more than maybe, I don't know, I'm not gonna,
Yeah.
age myself out,
No,
but.
it's a good suggestion,
Yeah,
thank
okay.
you, and it's something that we will take into consideration if we can all do it.
Okay.
I just really want that system to be running, before the end of the.
It's a good,
summer.
New Milford uses it. I'm
Yes.
building a house there right now, and when they do an inspection, 20 minutes later, you get an email saying you passed, and it's done. It's pretty,
Oh, yeah.
Pretty neat.
It'll be on the iPad.
definitely streamlines everything.
Yeah, right. We're gonna be, over the next year, trying to build the same type of a system with building maintenance, so that everything, in fact, some of the building maintenance guys use that now with their iPhones. So the work order comes up, they can input the material costs, they can input their hours, they can close out the order, and they just started that last week. So It's been a slow, painful process. It's always more complicated than I think it's gonna be and more time consuming, but we're getting there.
Jolene will be happy.
What's that?
Jolene will be happy.
Yes, she will.
She'll
I
be
just,
happy.
So will Kathy.
I'm sorry, I think it's important, like, if we're going to cut things, I always like to offer the money-saving option. So I think it's important to discuss that with, you know, the various cuts and whatnot.
Sure, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions so far? All right, where did I leave off?
Public,
Right.
highway.
Highway.
Left up on
Oh,
highway.
okay, so, yeah, so the $800,000 request was brought down to $700,000. And to your question, there may be enough left over from last year. As Bob said, the asphalt business baffles me because they put out literally hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of asphalt, the companies do, and you don't get billed for it till the end of the fall. And then Bob spends months going through the invoices and matching up square yards and tons, and he finds mistakes, so he sends it back. So sometime in the spring, they actually get paid, so then we'll see where we are. But if we don't get lucky in that regard, then cutting that budget will cut a couple of roads off his schedule next year. So we'd have to decide which ones would.
And this is the final year, right? This was the year you were gonna complete the main master plan
Yeah.
that you had started?
Yeah, right. That's correct. So it never really ends, but then it just
Right,
goes.
it just becomes more maintenance. He's
Yeah,
done
correct.
all the major work.
Matt, I'm sorry, you said we need to get lucky, right, to have some of the money that's in capital non-recurring be there to finish.
Well, either that or the money that was set aside for roads last year. Like Bob said, how much do we have left in that?
The last count was around 500,000, but that's not an accurate figure because
Yeah.
the bills
Because the
are,
bills aren't
you know,
in.
there's always problems with the bills, so you can't rely on that.
So when the bills are finally reconciled, if there's, you know, if, let's say there's 100,000 left over, then we can just pick up in the spring and keep going. Or we can tap capital non-recurring if there's leeway in that account.
Can that money that, if it's not all spent, can it be kept in that account? Doesn't it have to go to the general fund,
No, at the end of the year, go to general fund,
right?
but then you can make it, the Board of Finance can make an appropriation to go forward with an additional amount of money.
Okay, so whatever is in,
Yes, June 30th.
Yeah, so we can do it in the spring.
That's only if they close the project.
right.
Still not.
Okay. Any other questions on that? All right, then next, moving on to the next department is 245 Transfer Station. There's an increase here that reflects some additional hours of time. We made some substantial changes to the transfer station operation last year. We took away the $50 per year annual pass. And I want to give credit to the Ad hoc Transfer Station Committee. There's actually a committee of people who study trash and make really good recommendations. So we together studied the financial structure, did a survey, and found out that the reason that most people don't use the transfer station, if they know about it, is because there's that barrier. You have to go buy a permit for $50 to make that happen. So we took away the transfer station permit fee and increased the amount that you pay, it's called put and pay, that you pay per pound to throw away your trash by 5 cents a pound. And usage has gone up, the transfer station is almost breaking even. You know, by the end of the year, it may be completely breaking even. We've added some services and we'll be adding some hours to make it more convenient. So that's kind of a success story. Little department, but you know, we'll take successes wherever we can. Planning and zoning, Department 250, they requested $241,000. We took $5,000 out of contracted services. Again, that's engineering consulting that we plan to move in-house. Department 260.
Just to confirm on that,
Yeah.
planning and zoning, that, they're gonna have some policies, like, I believe they said when, you know, after 2 rounds, if they have to get the 3rd time inspection,
Yes.
they're gonna pay for that.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
the applicant, and then fines for zoning and wetlands.
Yes,
Okay,
yeah.
just wanna confirm that.
Yep, that's correct. Building maintenance, there was a substantial request for this department. We approved $722,000 and some change, and that represents a $10,000 reduction in maintenance and repairs. Mostly, we think we've got most of the major repairs that we're, we've been doing a lot of activity in that department the last couple of years, so we're gonna just ease off on that and just fix the things that get really broken.
That overtime is really sticking out to me, and I just can't remember how it was explained.
Well, if you remember last year, we reduced headcount overall by 2. There was 1 building maintainer, and then in the highway department, 1 mechanic.
Didn't they retire or?
Yeah, they were retired, but we didn't refill the
Right.
positions.
Mhm.
So this is actually a good thing, so overtime is up, but it's still much less expensive than having a full-time person with benefits in those departments. Now, it may get to the point that you have to go back and re-examine that if overtime gets to be so huge that somebody's working all the time and they can't take it, they can't even take a vacation, then you have to reassess that. But for now, paying a little bit of overtime is still saving us more money than hiring those positions. So far, we're in good shape on that.
So Matt, on this, we really have to go back 2 years to get a good baseline, right?
Yeah, well, it was
Because
reflected,
2 years ago, we had the
yeah,
additional
right.
full-time workers.
Right.
Whereas last year was a little off
Well,
year.
yeah, you can see the salary bumped for, and then going down in 2018, because they're not here. That's what it looks like to me.
Okay, the next 2 departments, tree warden, 270, and emergency management, 290. Basically flat, both of those, no changes. There hasn't been any change in those in several years. Department 300, fire marshal, modest reduction in that, $1,500, just flat funded one of the lines, which we think will be okay. Bethel Fire Department, again, we flat funded them from the prior year. They had some substantial capital needs that they put in there. We moved those, and those will be gutted. You will find them in the capital non-recurring sheet. So we took them out of the operating budget and moved it into capital non-recurring so that they would be kept whole in that area. Same thing with Stony Hill Fire Department. So with Bethel, we moved 19,000 and some into capital non-recurring, and with Stony Hill, 18,000. So you see that, yes.
Would you remind me about, on the Bethel Fire Department, why line 306, professional services, took such a dip? Like it's down, so why would that be?
Bob, is that
I think there's less
just?
volunteers that need medical checkups.
Professional services?
Well, what happened was, remember, we went to the new form this year, so some stuff that
Yes,
was in
things
there
are
last
moved
year
around,
is now
yeah.
moved. But the physicals are basically all still in there. Other stuff that was in professional services was moved into other line items. That's why there's a drop there, there's an increase in other lines.
Like vehicle maintenance? I mean, I'm just wondering what they went into.
Like pump testing and stuff, which is, I kept in professional services, went to the vehicle maintenance.
Okay, I can see where that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, just to cover that thing, the Stony Hill and the Bethel Fire Departments had similar functions on different lines, different departments, and what the finance department did is try to line them up so that they're all the same. So what, it makes it, for this year anyway, it makes it confusing, because if you show a drop in one area but an increase in another, but we might have to wait a year before it makes sense, but next year it'll all look perfect.
No, I get that. I hope for next year that they'll be identical with different numbers in them.
Well,
That's my dream.
I think you'll be happy
That's my
with next
dream.
year, because we've got some surprises in that regard.
Oh, boy, I can't wait.
Okay, Registrar of Voters, this is a decrease from the prior year. I see one of our registrars just walked in, and they've done a yeoman's job, Tim and Nancy, and streamlining the department, making it very efficient. State of Connecticut now requires ever since the big Bridgeport disaster about 8 years ago, State of Connecticut requires all registrars to go through a training course. They went through it before the state required it, and they passed it with flying colors. So we have a very, very strong crew here in Bethel, and they don't get paid a lot compared to other towns. So they're quasi-volunteers. So I just want to thank them both for what they do. So, and that's not a hint, that's just letting you know. Town boards and commissions, no change in this. This is just the account for office supplies, services, recording fees, and so on for all the different boards and commissions. Health department. Health department, I think, is probably the department that is stressed the most with the workload. There, not only is there more work, there's more inspections, there's more to do with restaurants, there's more to do with grease traps. So there's just more of those, but on top of that, the state regulations that the health department has to enforce keep ramping up and up and up. Laura asked for a full-time sanitarian. We couldn't quite get there, but we substantially increased the hours for her department to hire contract workers to take the load off her, because Laura cannot possibly work 7 days a week, and she's been doing that for some time now just to try to keep up with the load. And it puts a lot of strain on the department, and it puts a lot of strain on the people who rely on her department, because it's very hard for her to meet the statutory requirements to get the work out. She's got to meet the law, and that's been hard. So we want to give her some help in that area. So she's one of the areas that we did increase. Yes.
I'm just going to attest that there's been many nights where Laura's called at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, and I know it's after hours answering questions because she's so busy. So just definitely can attest that department's a very busy department in town.
Yeah, we're going to make some changes ergonomically in her office too, to provide a little bit more privacy so they're not interrupted as often, which is a problem I wasn't even aware of until a couple days ago. But we need to give some help, and we're going to have to keep an eye on this. If this is not enough, we might have to look at some mid-year adjustments by taking from other areas and shoring her up. But I do want to give the health department a commitment that we're going to make sure that they have the resources to do their job. Police department. This is another one that gave us a extremely well-reasoned presentation, as I mentioned. They showed graphs and charts that fully justified 2 new police patrol officers. And we're going to have to, I think what I would recommend is that we try to do 1 next year and 1 the following year to get them up to speed. But we couldn't do it this year. We also took them from request of 4 new police vehicles to 3. And that happens from time to time when we have tight budgets. We can get by as long as they don't make a habit of it, so they can handle that. Yes, Brian.
And I know we're not deliberating, but I just wanted to give a little food for thought
Sure.
on this one. Really saying adding a police officer next year is really adding them the following year because of the amount of training, police academy, field training time. They're really not a police officer for 10 months. If you're lucky, you'll have them. And with the academy reducing classes every year, it's gotten even worse. I mean, we could wait a year before someone's ready. And as I was thinking about it, and it's just food for thought if it's doable, if we reduced overtime by another 30,000 and told them they could hire after January 1st, technically it's a wash because it's $60,000 for a new officer. If we reduce the 30,000, let them hire in January, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a wash, and if we were planning on doing it next year, we'll actually have a police officer next year, rather than waiting till next July to approve it, and then if we're lucky, we get an academy seat in September, and then if you're lucky, they're a police officer the following year. So, I mean, is it a gamble for next year? Yeah, I mean, they're starting 60,000 in arrears next year, but if we're committed to getting another officer, it's a way where we could get it done this year. So it's just food for thought for deliberations and just to see if you guys would support it and is that something that's doable.
So the next academy is in September?
We have an academy coming up. We're sending someone in April, then you'll have one generally in September, and then they'll generally do one in January sometime, then January or February. But the academy keeps reducing the amount of classes they're offering, and everyone's fighting for those seats. So if you give them a commitment that we could get this done after January, they're able to look at when the academy classes are scheduled and reserve a seat well in advance, rather than fight for those seats that might not be there. I mean, we've had to send my department numerous officers to New Haven, Bridgeport, other academies, because you just can't get seats anymore. It's just a thought where we're not adding to the budget this year, and we're doing what we're saying next year, but really accomplishing it for next year.
Starting out. Question, when do you, when you hire a new recruit and they get sent off to the academy, when do you begin paying their salary? When they go to the academy?
The day we swear them in. So the testing process would have to start before January. It takes a long time to go through the written exam, the oral boards, then you have polygraph, psychological, background check, and to be honest with you, we lose so many candidates in a background check, you want to give yourself plenty of time. But the hire date can be after January. Once you've hired them and sworn them in is when you start paying them. And then again, that's according to contract. I don't know what Bethel's contract is, but our contract, the day they get hired, they start getting paid. That's why if it's after January 1st, I figure it would be a 0%
Okay.
this year's, the budget we're talking about.
Right, right. So that's after the academy, right? The swearing in is after the academy?
It depends on the department. We swear them in ahead of time.
Okay,
Some
great.
departments swear them in after. I mean, we swear them in the day they get hired, we swear them in. But
I
they're
think we do too.
they're probationary police officers. So
Yeah.
basically, we have a year after they're graduated the academy to part ways if we're not happy with them. But it's just, I just wanted to give food for thought for the board for an alternative if we really are committed to increasing the size of the police department. And I think based on national events, you know, really over the past couple of years, it might not be the worst idea.
Yeah, okay, a good suggestion, thank you. Okay, moving on to Department 380, Parks and Recreation. This is a department that I think is another department that's stressed because of the increase in population and the fact that a lot of the new developments in Bethel do not come with recreational space. It's something that I know the planning and zoning is going to be trying to deal with in their next plan of conservation and development. But as we get new residents, there's more and more utilization of the parks that we have. And long-term, I think we need to develop a plan, and you'll see that we did try to address that in the capital budget with some planning money. So the department request we didn't touch, that's 1.293 million, almost 294 million. But keep in mind that out of that number, they generate, most of the increases are program fees for new programs, but they generate $575,000 in revenue. So the other increases in the operating that's not related to revenue is mostly things like fertilizers and materials that, you know, you have to use them and you have to pay the price. They do shop around, they do buy on contract, they look at the state bids, they get the best price they can. But the state requires organic fertilizers where children are going to be around, can't just use anything. So those things get to be a little pricey, and we're a little bit at the mercy of the price increases. But most of the increases in this department are programs that are revenue generating. And of course, you don't see that in this budget.
Right,
Employee
For
benefit.
those following along or trying to in the program, we are through 28 of the 38 departments, so we have 10 more to go. Sorry, Matt, go ahead.
Employee benefits, 390. We reduced this by almost $38,000. And this is something that we don't normally touch. And this, we removed the contribution to what's known as the fireman's pension. And I want to be very clear, because we have firemen here, it doesn't mean the pension is going away or not being paid. It just means the fund is so healthy that we can stick a year and not make a payment on it, because it's grown in value. So just make sure those guys got that. All right, thank you. Yes.
I understand like the stock market's up and every fund is up, but I just think long-term this is a way to get yourself in trouble. If you've set a schedule of payments to a pension fund, I think it's important to dollar cost average that over years. So just because the market's up this year doesn't mean next year we're not going to see a catastrophic loss.
Yeah.
So, I mean, personally, and this is just from my experience with pension funds and whatnot, I just always get very nervous when I see we don't need to fund a pension this year, because like I said, dollar cost averaging is the,
Yeah.
so you buy when it's low, great. You buy when it's high, you're still going in case it goes down. I don't know whether it's a wise cut.
Let me add a little bit more detail to that. This isn't really a pension in the classic sense of the word, because a pension is a defined benefit retirement plan that's regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission. This isn't any of the, it's basically an insurance policy that was originally purchased as a whole life policy for all the firefighters who were active. And it generates a cash value, and then that cash value pays a dividend back to them when they reach retirement age, on condition that they serve the town for a certain number of years. The benefit amount is $250 a month, and so it's really, think of it more like a whole life policy for a whole bunch of guys, and then the cash value that is accumulated gets paid back to them. So it's not really as volatile as like monkeying with a real pension. And thanks to Bob's efforts and the Insurance and Pension Commission and our pension, or not a pension, our investment advisor for Morgan Stanley, it's not just the fact that the market's up, it's the fact that the town put more money into this over a number of years when the program was kind of stabilized. And now it's healthy enough that we have the option. But you make a good point. I think that's a very valid point to not be too aggressive in cutting something like that.
Do you know what the balance is on their fund?
What was that?
The balance is of their pension fund, or what it's at?
Just so you know.
It's $679,000 is in the fund right now. The fund
No, this is my
population
next
is
question.
frozen. It was frozen back in 2011, so not all firemen are part of this plan.
Oh,
There's about
okay.
80 between the two fire departments.
Oh, really?
So over a period of time,
Yeah, okay.
there's probably maybe half that number that
Yeah,
are not collecting, and maybe they're in their 50s. They can't be collecting until they're age 65, so,
I mean, in a perfect storm, you'd be liable for $160,000 a month.
well,
I mean, a year.
last year it earned 77,000,
Yeah.
and the reduction in the account
So
because
that is that. Okay, fine.
payouts was 22,000.
22,000.
So are you
So, and the net
comfortable
result
with
is
it?
679.
The cut?
Yeah, because we've overfunded it in some years, and the number of people who actually qualified for it is smaller than we thought. Because you have, each fire department has well, let me back up a little bit. The company that offers this doesn't offer it anymore. It's a company called VFIS, Volunteer Firemen's Insurance System. And it was frozen because they no longer will do business with us. And I don't even think they offer it to any other towns. I think they got out of it. But each fire department had a certain number of qualifications that each volunteer had to meet. So you have to be active, and by active, you have to attend every monthly meeting, you have to go out on a certain number of calls. So for each department, it turns out that there were fewer number of volunteers who actually qualified for it than we originally thought. So the liability is actually dropped in this thing. So, we can keep it in there. It's just, it doesn't hurt to have it more healthy instead of less healthy. So I think you make a good point.
All right, we will deliberate it more tomorrow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions on employee benefits? Okay. 400 non-government agency subsidies, that's part of social services now, so I'm gonna skip that. 405 intra-government agency subsidies. This actually went down a little bit, which is a good thing. This is where we pay for our membership to Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, Heart Bus, Sweetheart Bus, the Western Connecticut Council of Governments, and a couple others. And every one of those agencies held their cost level except for two. Sweetheart Bus went down and Council of Governments went down. Council of Governments actually created a new dues structure that takes into account population density and square miles. And when they plug the numbers in, we got a break and New Milford paid more. So, sorry to New Milford.
I think the Sweetheart Bus, the Sweetheart Bus, is that for people who call and they get the bus?
Yeah.
So,
It's not just seniors though, it's anybody who has mobility.
no, you know where I'm going with this. You know where I'm going with this. That's
Yeah.
why you said that. No, I don't, but what percentage are seniors, if you know?
I don't know.
It's an interesting question.
I can I will be happy to call our contact at Hart and find that out.
That'd
Because
be-
I would be
yeah.
willing to bet they have a breakdown of that.
Yeah,
We make a note.
because that could affect that particular account, especially when, because we have the senior van.
Well, yeah, we were just talking about that last night, and trying to find a way to isolate and predict, what the utilization change is gonna be.
The problem though with just relying on the senior van really is, I mean, that's a fairly limited service, right? I mean, there's probably a high demand for a limited amount of trips. I mean, if you're going to Danbury Hospital or they need to take someone, I mean, you can only really, how many people have a doctor's appointment at the same time?
Well, they do other things. They schedule special trips, and,
Right. But I'm not questioning the validity of the senior van.
Oh, no, I
What
know.
I'm saying is the complement of the Sweetheart bus may just be necessary based on the limited.
But we're delivering to,
Well, I'm
That
just
could be.
adding that.
I don't know, we're asking questions.
yeah, that could be.
That's a question.
Is it?
I will
Right
with this.
here.
Okay. Did you want me to find out something about that, though?
She does. I'm fine.
Okay.
She knows.
All right. Where were we?
410.
There we are. Utilities. That's a little bit up from the prior year, but down from the original submission. As I mentioned, this is where we pick up the first year savings from the solar farm, $34,285. So.
That's a nice thing.
Department 420 miscellaneous
Oh,
charges and transfers.
Utilities.
Oh, okay, yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
here's my question.
Yeah.
Because I was here last night.
Yeah.
So the solar farm, I
Yeah.
believe you said there was a savings of $34,285. So here's my question. When we put the solar farm together, were there not accompanying legal fees that were associated with that? And I'm just wondering if the legal fees cancel or zero out the savings for this particular time period. Because again, we always talk about savings and whatnot, but we don't usually talk about what went into making the thing that's supposed to save us money. You know what I'm saying?
I doubt it. The town attorney reviewed the contracts when, we wouldn't have even been that wouldn't have even been last year, it would have been the year before. Because this thing took seven and a half years to get off the ground.
Right.
So the town attorney did review the contracts when we were in that phase of it, but there hasn't been any cost since then.
Were there have been no costs other
No.
than the initial legal fees?
I don't think so, no.
Okay.
Whatever cost, Amoresco picked them up, and
Yeah.
that was part of the deal.
No, I know that. I
Amoresco.
just, I
Yeah.
didn't know if there were any more.
Whatever the town attorney, if there was an overage above the retainer to review those individual contracts, which I would guess, I don't know, might have been a couple $1,000.
Yeah, it wouldn't have come up to that much.
Yeah.
All right,
But
thank
no,
you.
and just so everybody knows, the solar farm is a power purchase agreement with a third-party supplier, so basically, we are allowing Amoresco to use our cap landfill, and they cover everything, the warranty, if the panels go bad, they need to be replaced, they pay for all that stuff, and they sell us power at a reduced rate, and that's what the savings is. And that's on a 20-year contract. Yes.
Do we ever, or do we expect or hope that number, that savings amount will increase over
Mhm.
time?
Actually, this is sort of like the minimum savings, because what this does is it insulates us from any disruptions in Wall Street, in the energy markets. So let's say, right now, natural gas is cheap. Energy from gas-fired generators is cheap, but if you watch the energy markets as they've changed over the last 5 to 8 years, New England is very vulnerable because the oldest nuclear plants are aging out, going offline. Nobody wants a plant in their backyard, so there's a lot of pushback on that. So Eversource and other suppliers have to buy energy from plants far, far away and basically just bring it in online. So the generating costs are going up, and if there's any disruption in other markets like oil and gas that force up that price, you could see significant spikes in energy. And that's happened in the past, as we know. I moved here during oil embargo
That's
number
right.
2 in 1979, so I'm familiar with that. So what this does is it insulates us from, to the degree that we can get sunlight, that is gonna
Yeah.
stabilize our energy costs in the future. So it's a pretty good deal.
Good.
Is there a variable like in the cost? Do you know how much cheaper it is, what they charge us than the normal rate?
Well, it depends on what the normal rate is, because the normal rate fluctuates. We buy energy off the grid from Santa, right?
No,
The
Constellation Energy.
Constellation Energy.
Okay.
And that's a contract that has to be negotiated every year,
Uh-huh.
so, what Constellation wanted an increase of, I can't remember what it was.
It's around 8.5 cents, 8.4 cents kilowatt hour.
And maybe you already said this, but is Amoresco, they're selling it to us for the price, but the delivery system is what Bob's talking about. So is that guaranteed from Amoresco, a certain percentage of savings
Mhm.
over the 10 years? How long?
20.
20 years,
20.
okay.
And the way it works is in order to keep this tax-free, the solar farm powers the highway garage. And, when the sun is shining, it powers all the highway garage need more so, and then the excess goes into a transfer switch and then goes out to the grid. So essentially, the town of Bethel is kind of
Yeah,
like
the grid serves the town municipal
Yeah,
buildings. Okay.
right,
All right, thanks.
so, all right. Any other questions on that? Okay. Miscellaneous charges and transfers, nothing exciting here. We left this intact. This is where we put contingencies for negotiations and so on. Senior Center. I want to point this out. This looks like a big increase, because if you look at your sheet, I think the number is 28%. But over the past couple of years, we have been phasing programs into the senior center exactly the way we do with Parks and Recreation. Prior to hiring our new director, the folks that provided services, so like the yoga instructor and the Zumba instructor would just charge directly. And rather than allow that, what we do now is we negotiate group rates. And then the people, and not everything is charged, by the way. A lot of things the senior center provides are free, but where there's a charge, we collect the charge and then we pay the provider and make sure they get a proper 1099 for tax purposes and all that kind of stuff. And one of the big changes coming up this year is that for insurance purposes and for legal liability purposes, we are taking over the big trips that they do. And they do some really great things, like 7-day river cruise on the Danube, group trips, stuff like this. And this used to be operated by the Friends of the Seniors. So we're going to be taking that over and also collecting the revenue. So when you see the big change here, just remember that, like Park and Rec, there's a revenue offset that comes in on the back end that's not shown here.
And Matt, do we have a sense for what the percentage of that offset is? Right, in Park and Rec, we kind of know it's almost 100% for added program
What was that
costs.
one? I didn't hear.
Sure. Do we have a sense for how much of the roughly 3,000 increase is being offset by these program fees?
Like
Revenue?
The revenue for the trips at the senior center?
In the revenue side, it's about $30,000, $35,000.
Yeah. It's not a complete wash.
36.
And the part that's not a wash is that our staff has to take over the logistics of that too. So, and that's part of it. Yes.
Pursuant to that, I believe that, yesterday, but last meeting, I had requested the revenue streams from the revenue generating departments. And so we're doing it kind of ad hoc here, but I would love to see the different departments that generate income, what they generate, so I can compare it to the budget. Like the offsetting.
Still working on that.
Sorry? Oh, okay, just wanted to clarify that.
Bob, I just wanted to see if I understand your response to Bob's question. He asked about the $50,000, the increase, and you said it was offset by 36, or that's the entire
There's
revenue?
36,000 in
Is the entire
revenue
revenue?
on the revenue side of not the budget, but on the revenue side.
Okay.
And maybe just to drill down a little bit more, Bob, was that the fiscal year 18 number or the projected
It's
fiscal
been
year
the same
19?
the last couple of years.
Got it, okay. Okay.
What did you reduce here? Because I have that, it seems, it's like 9,000 or something.
Yeah, on the senior center,
Hmm.
that was from her original submission. She had increases, I think 10 hours, was it 10 hours a
Right.
week or
It
5?
was supposed to be 10, and she calculated it, I think maybe, she kept saying 11, but I think she had calculated for 40 hours.
Yeah.
So that was the overage based on the first assistant's salary.
She calculated too many hours in requesting, so we caught the error and brought it into line.
Okay, so it's not, there's no full-time transition here?
No, there's a full-time
Yeah.
transition.
Okay,
The-
so you,
Okay.
you approved the full-time?
Yes, we've
And
approved
just
the,
changed the,
yeah, we approved the full-time, but the number that she'd submitted was a little too high, so we just.
Okay,
corrected it.
because what I have here is like 42,682 for the first assistant, and then 11,607 for each, for 2 additional assistants. That's what I have that, when they presented that. So you're saying that that is someone going from part-time to full-time?
Mhm.
So it's not a new person?
Correct. Somebody who's already there is gonna go to full-time.
So this is just a question.
Sure.
What would it not be feasible to add a part-time person rather than making somebody a full-time person who then becomes a benefits issue and all that? I mean, I say
Yeah.
issue, I mean, it's great for them, but just,
Right, yeah,
Question.
it triggers the benefits.
right.
No, the answer is no, we explored that, and the answer is if you start putting full-time people in and they do similar jobs, the labor department says, we know what you're doing.
What do you mean? You mean start putting part-time people?
That's what I meant, part-time. If you take essentially the same job
Okay,
and you break it into part-time positions, the labor department views that as avoiding full-time benefits. And
Okay.
that gets you into trouble, so, because we did look at that, you know, but that's,
Unless you're Home Depot.
or Walmart. Yeah, I know.
all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Matt, you left the garage in, is it in this account or the,
The garage? No.
No, it's not
okay,
in this.
in the capital?
Yeah.
Okay,
That was capital, but we did not leave it in for this year,
okay.
okay?
I have one more question about the senior center.
Sure,
It's about the van.
yes.
You know, I wasn't very popular because I voted no for the van. And the reason I did is because I suspected that it would become more of an issue in terms of getting a driver. Now we have an increase for the driver.
Mhm.
What I didn't know when that was presented last year was that it has to be on the road for 40 hours a week.
Mhm.
That was not actually told us.
Hmm.
Because if it was, then we would know that there's gonna be an increase in that line for a driver.
Mhm.
So,
Well,
what's that all about?
I think that was that calculated in the 2 drivers that were in the request before?
Right, but if
Because
in
there
the,
were 2 drivers for 20 hours.
there
a
was,
week.
well, I believe it was 20,000 and it was cut to 10. But
Yeah.
that's what I thought.
Yeah.
But if it had been presented
Yeah.
as a mandatory 40 hours, then we may have had the opportunity to look at that as something that, well, we might as well approve this because it's gonna come anyway, and then take something else somewhere else. So I just felt that,
Okay.
that, you know,
Right.
should have been presented.
Is that covered by part-time people?
Yeah, 2.
2 part-timers split?
They're different schedules, yeah.
And that's why I want to know about the Sweetheart bus, because
Yes.
maybe they, you know, yeah.
And-
Yeah,
and
I'll
you-
get back to you on that, because I've got to
Okay.
know.
And you're able to do that because it's a new position, right?
Yeah.
The only time it's a problem is if you have an existing position
Yes.
that goes vacant, you can't say, well, now we're gonna turn it into 2 part-time positions.
Right.
Right.
that's
But if
correct.
it's a brand-new position that doesn't
Correct.
exist,
Like one person works Monday, Thursday, the other person works Tuesday, Wednesday,
Yep,
Saturday,
got it.
whatever, yeah.
okay.
Correct.
And there was a thought of possibly having volunteers to drive, but they found that was impossible to do
Yeah,
for reasons.
that's true. Okay. All right, where are we? Library, 435. Almost left it intact. The selectmen took $8,800 out, just, it's a 1% reduction. Still leaves them with an increase, and they're doing some very exciting things over there. And there was no other, as you know, with the library, we don't control the line items, just the bottom line. And this was just to help us reach a number. We wanted to make sure that the budget increase was below 2%, so this is one of the things we did. Debt service, something you can never change. Well, not us anyway, we just change it by not piling up any more debt. That was to you.
Can we go back to the library for a
Sure.
second? Because we kind of blew through that. I'm also not popular about the library, just saying in advance.
Is that a
you know.
question?
No, I'm working into the question. I'm working
It's
my
the
way
predicate
into
to the
it.
question.
So I asked about, when that presentation went down, I asked about fundraising, like Friends of the Library, whatever. So I'm wondering what opportunities they have or whatever. Now, I have a copy of this, but I'm not going to hand it out right now. A photograph of a dumpster overfilled with books from the library thrown out. And that's an issue for me, because for me, I take that as waste. Because I went online immediately and found 4 places where you can either consign or sell online. There are numerous libraries in Connecticut that actually have a section that's for used books. And these books are not old junky books. I mean, I couldn't zoom in close enough to see the titles, but these are, I was wondering, because they have in their budget to buy new books. And it just makes me wonder, do these books go bad? Are they not any, relevant anymore? And it's just, I'm just putting it out there because this is why I have an issue. Because when I see something like that, it makes me think there's more. And that to me is a disregard of well, first of all, it's books, and some people feel very sentimental about books. And I just feel that if you're throwing things out like that, that could actually, they get, like, it's $8 a book. I looked at this online place, they don't even charge shipping, and they, do the whole thing. So I don't understand that.
Well, obviously, we weren't prepared to answer a question like that. I don't know.
I just put it out there because it has to do with the question of how these numbers come up.
Well, no, I understand.
how
but
We,
see,
we
it's not-
have further deliberation tomorrow.
Okay,
Yeah,
we'll
and I
deliberate.
Let's
will,
talk
I
about it
will,
then.
I will speak to the
Okay.
library director and find out what that is, because that's, that would be concerning, and I think that deserves an answer.
See, it is a
So-
question.
Yep.
There's an answer.
Matt, not knowing what the details are, but it could be the Friends of the Libraries, they have thousands of books donated to them, and they could be cleaning their shelves.
They
I
could
don't
be.
know if that's true or not.
I've donated books that they say, we can't take these. There are places that recycle books and just reclaim the paper. So there could be any number of really valid reasons, so I think we'll talk about that tomorrow.
Okay.
All right, any other questions on library?
I think it's also just worth noting, because we were talking about revenue before, that the library generated $15,000 worth of revenue this past year, and the actual increase to them is less than the money they generated, so that's a good thing.
Yep, thank you. Moving on to 440 debt service, no change to that, $3,939,238. Board of Education, slight reduction here. The Selectmen reduced by $50,000. Again, for no other reason than to try to meet the number and keep the aggregate as low as possible.
When we did our calculations, did Bob assume the level of the cut last year? Like, what did you plug in for a number, Bob, in educational cost sharing for yourself? Did you
$7 million.
So you figured the cut was just
Yeah,
gonna
we-
stand at $7 million?
That's, as you know, that's up in the air, but we're assuming that the governor's number that they hit us with last year is gonna be the same, that we're not gonna get it back. So that's the reason for the cuts that we did, to try to keep that number low, because we believe that we're gonna have to absorb that million. It's not gonna get any worse, we don't think. But, yeah, that was anticipated. Okay. Then finally, 460 building maintenance. There was a reduction in this account and we didn't touch it. We left it at $500,008. So that leaves a total of $74,334,524. And what we took out of the budget was $535,281. And again, remember that a substantial chunk of that, 363,000 thereabouts, went over to capital non-recurring. So that will be absorbed into the upcoming budget and some of it into the current year budget. And you'll see, you know, later in the spring, we'll be presenting you with, you know, some requests to use up the capital non-recurring. So, that is the operating budget. Any other questions?
Are we doing capital?
Yeah. Anybody want a break, or you keep going?
I want to break.
All right.
Moving on.
All right, capital. You have several sheets in front of you. See which one, the one I'm looking at right now is the capital summary. Page looks like this.
Okay.
So, this,
With the color? You don't have that one.
I was not given that one.
Here, we can share it.
We have extra copies here.
Oh, okay.
Just whatever she needs.
we've got a summary sheet that looks like this.
Yeah,
and
okay.
It's stapled to the 10-year plan. This-
Oh, all right.
This sheet doesn't show all 10 years because I couldn't fit it all without making it like 0.0 dates on it. And I have a hard time reading it as it is. But it's color coded. So you can see the column that is in blue is what was approved for this year's capital plan. The two columns that are in yellow, one of them is marked CNR 2017-18, and the next one is marked CNR 2018-2019. Those are the items that we're recommending to pull out of the capital request and put in capital non-recurring for the current fiscal year and for the upcoming fiscal year. And then the pink column, or purple,
Some more
depending on-
fuchsia.
Fuchsia.
Violet.
These are the items that we're deferring kind of open-endedly to another year. Maybe it's next year, maybe it's a year after. We didn't specify that. We just moved them out to try to keep the capital from growing too much and borrowing too much. And that's, as I mentioned, if you go through the summary sheet, you will see that we recommended for the capital plan 2.1 million, a little over 2.1. Capital non-recurrent is 363,000 about. Deferred projects 7.7 million, and that totals up to the 10.2 million that was in the original request. So the recommended, I won't read these to you because you've got them there, but 4 highway projects, including trucks and important culvert replacement, high school HVAC, BMS auditorium stage lighting, some more building maintenance having to do with the highway garage. Bethel Fire Department, we are recommending $660,000 to replace engine 6. This is kind of important because engine 6 has been in the shop more often than it has been on the road. Like when we had the fire a week before last over on Judd. It was either not there or didn't start. I don't remember which it was. Wasn't there. It was in the shop again. 24 years old, correct? 21, okay. It's at the end of its life. I do want to point out something. I think, let's see, what's this, 2018, 5 years ago, the Selectmen sponsored a study by the Holdsworth Group. This is a fire safety consultancy. And we had Mr. Holdsworth come in and go to both of our fire departments and do an evaluation. We asked him to look at every piece of equipment, its age, its condition, its expected lifespan, the plan of conservation and development in the town, and look at the needs over the next 30 years as the town grows and we have new developments like Copper Square and the Summit, and try to project out not only when each of those pieces of apparatus needs to be replaced, but what new things might we need in the future as we have these new developments. One of the things that happens that Mr. Holdsworth put in the report is that as we get 2 and 3, I think we top out at 3-story developments, but with greater setbacks so that the apparatus can't get right up next to the building, you need longer tower apparatus to be able to reach the roofs of those things. So Mr. Holdsworth gave us a 30-year schedule and said, you know, in 2015 you should do this, in 2019 you should replace this, and 2024 you should add a piece that looks like this. And this was a recommendation, it's not a hard and fast rule. But he also said, if you want to get to the point where you're not floating a bond or a bond anticipation note every time you need a piece of fire apparatus, what you should do starting in 2013 is salt away $300,000. Just keep doing it year after year. In municipal finance, they call that a sinking fund. And it's just basically a capital non-recurring that's earmarked for a certain thing. So then when you hit these milestones and Engine 6 is ready to bite the dust, you don't have to go do a bond anticipation note to get it. You can just buy the thing. Because of the budget pressures that we've had, that you're all familiar with over the past few years, we're still struggling to get our highway account up to 800,000. So we haven't had that extra 300,000 to put in the bank. But it is something that I think we have to start making a real effort to do, whether we take, if we have tax collection surpluses like conveyance fees that are unanticipated at the end of the year, maybe set those aside, something to start saving for the future, so we don't have to, we're not reliant on the financial markets to do these things. So unfortunately, we didn't do that, so we have recommended replacing Engine 6 in this. Yes, Brian?
I don't have a question about Engine 6. I see that we've moved out years purchasing 2 aerial ladders.
Those are, yes, there were 2 requests.
I guess I would just question, and I guess we would need to defer to the expert, does Bethel really need 2 aerial ladders? And it's no disrespect to anyone in the room, but we're about 16 square miles, and I mean, it seems like, I mean, you know, I work in a town a little bit larger with a larger commercial base. We have 1 aerial ladder, and they seem to get by with that. And other towns that are even larger than ours have 1 aerial ladder and seem to get by with that. So are we moving these way out, or is this something we should expect to be, because that's a really significant
Well, yeah,
purchase.
They're
I mean,
over $1 million apiece. Yeah, that's exactly what
it seems like a type of apparatus that would be better served shared, whether it's stationed downtown. I'm not gonna get involved in logistics, but, you know,
Well,
wherever it's
yeah.
stationed, I mean, I just can't imagine that they can't have a mutual aid agreement with something like that.
They already do, but you're right, and that's a question we have to talk about, because I don't have the answer to that. Bethel Fire has an aerial that is 85 feet long, I believe, right? 90? You put some on the end, right? So they have a 90-foot. Stony Hill is looking for 110, I think, right? 107. And that's the right question to ask. And we may have to get everybody together with, you know, and look. I'll even widen out the scope. Not only mutual aid between our 2 departments, and they work together great. You will go to any fire call in this town, you will find Stony Hill and Bethel, as well as a couple others. They usually call in mutual aid just as a backup, even if there's a chance it could be a big fire. So I think we even have to widen it out and talk to our neighboring towns and regionally explore where we position these pieces to save everybody money, not only us, but the other towns.
Well, the
too,
police
so we have-
departments did that with the blue plan.
Yes,
So,
correct.
you know, we draw from departments all over Fairfield County if we have a critical incident, and it's right there in a plan. If Bridgeport has a major catastrophe, we know we're sending 1 supervisor, 2 patrol officers, no questions asked. So that's my question on mutual aid. And I have one more question with capital, if I'm allowed
Go
to.
ahead, sure.
The police department, I see the equipment for the new range has been put out
Yes.
for some time. And I guess my question to that would be, have we thought about the effects of, 1, leaving a building vacant, which is actually one of the worst things for any structure, whether it be new or what, you know, buildings should be used, and it actually is better for a house or a dwelling to be used than to sit vacant. My second concern is you have all the contractors, your, you know, HVAC guys are there, I'm sure there's a ventilation system, you have your electricians there, you have everyone there right now, is the cost gonna go up by not equipping this range, you know, at the completion of this project? I mean, I remember when we talked about the police department, you know, I was at a lot of the meetings, and a lot of residents were insistent on that range being part of the project. I mean,
So
I
the
think.
police.
Yeah, well, absolutely, the police were, because the other reality is, there's really no place to shoot anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, FCI's closing, Worcester Mountain's harder to get to. If you don't have an indoor range close by, you're really reliant on, you know, friends in neighboring towns allowing you a place to shoot. So I guess, again, as a board, it's, you know, maybe we can't do it in the budget right now. Maybe we need to see where money shakes out mid-year, but I have a lot of concerns about leaving that space vacant.
I can only speak personally. We didn't really talk about it much, but I share your concern. It's not, I would prefer not to leave it vacant, and I would prefer to finish the building. The problem is that we don't really know what the number is. So I can't come to you and say, that's the number. Because if you remember, we had a referendum 3 years ago and it failed. So the plans were adjusted a little bit, and one of the things that was adjusted was, right from the second referendum on, we said at that referendum, this, what you're voting on for, you know, 13 point whatever it was million, included the range shell, but not the inside, not the equipment inside. And what we were hoping was gonna happen is that the bids would come in. There was a pretty healthy contingency in that project. So we were hoping the bids were gonna come in low enough to leave contingency to at least do part of the range, you know, rudimentary range, if not the whole thing. That's not happening. The bids in some areas are low, the bids in some areas are high. It doesn't look like the contingency is gonna cover it, but to go to a referendum and have a town meeting on this, I don't know exactly what that number is. This was really a very rough estimate.
It's something we could rectify
Yes.
if we choose to
Yes.
down the road.
And I think you could probably, I could probably guarantee that once we know what that number is, we will probably come back to you and say, no, let's see what we can do about this. Now, two other things I want to point out, and the reason I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the folks who are here visiting tonight. Oh, do you have a question
With
first?
the police station and building maintenance, if I could, quickly.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so, you know, Brian was talking about, is that in the, anywhere documented that this, that the range inside wasn't included in that, it is? Okay,
Yeah.
because I just thought that, I don't know why, I really thought it was, so,
Yeah.
and especially since, you know, you say you thought there would be a contingency that might provide for that, so, okay. But my big question is, for building maintenance, now,
Where's the
building and
capital?
maintenance on the capital.
Are you on the colored?
I'm on the colored one,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
So, the roof repairs got, now where are those? Wait a minute.
The highway garage roof?
Yeah,
Yes.
right,
It's
but
the
I,
first line.
for some reason I thought that's still in there for this year?
Yes.
Okay, because
Yeah.
I don't know why I
They did
thought
one
last night
section,
it was
now they're
pushed
going
out.
into the section.
They did, a couple of years ago, you see the 150, they did a section a few years back, and now they're doing the other section. That doesn't cover the whole thing. This is the, Rich and Paul, this is the admin area, right?
Yeah, they did. Well, they need that to
So-
do the carbon monoxide thing, which we approved that in 2016.
They did that part. You're thinking of the garage part where the vehicles are. What this is the admin area where the offices and the garage, and the supply bays.
So the CO system's all done?
Yes.
The ejection system?
No, that was done.
Okay,
That was done, I think.
Amoresco.
Yeah, that was done
Amoresco
last year
and-
sometime.
Good.
Like in the fall. I
no,
think.
that's good.
That's
I
very good.
wasn't aware, so, okay, great. Now. as you-
Okay,
as you-
well, before I get to the other capital, I just want to point out, you'll see the possible CNR project, that's where we've got, library stuff, pressure washing the building, painting, and you'll notice that the building's starting to grow some mold. Mower for Park and Rec, this is the big $68,000 mower, we want to lease that, and that's about $13,000 a year. Then all the fire apparatus, the attack hose, supply hose, gas meters, upgrading building security. One thing we're putting in you'll see in capital non-recurring, town hall municipal repairs. There are a number of things that come up every year, like safety issues, replacing carpet, things becoming a true wall hazard. You know, some of the carpet in here was put in when this building was renovated over 20 years ago, and it's never been changed. Air conditioning that fails, heating that fails. So we're trying to just kind of put a flat number in capital non-recurring. If we don't use it, it just rolls over to the next year and reduces the upcoming budget. But recognizing that buildings get old and things fail, so we're just trying to be responsible in the budgeting there. A couple other things, deferred projects. There's some things that are very important that we're just gonna have to put off. One of them is environmental compliance. You'll see that under the bottom of that summary sheet, under highway, every town in Connecticut is under a lot of heat from DEEP, from Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, because we drive our trucks around in the salt, they spread salt, and we come take them into the garage and we hose the salt off, and that goes into the groundwater. We're not supposed to do that. We are under a lot of pressure, as is every town, to provide some kind of a vehicle wash station where that liquid with the contaminants is captured and then put through a proper waste treatment facility. So this plan, the $105,000, was gonna be for a 40,000 gallon storage tank to be buried in the ground at the highway garage. So you'd rinse off the trucks in the garage, it would drain into that tank, and then, you know, every so often you pump out the tank and you take it to the Danbury Waste Treatment Center. We want to revisit that plan and see if it makes more sense to actually build a wash station at the Paul Street Center, where we already have access to the sewer, and you don't have to bury a tank and deal with all that rigmarole. So we're going to put that off and do some more work on that, see if we can't, A, find a better solution, and B, one that doesn't cost as much. But again, to go back to a couple of the things that I really wanted to mention, we did put on the turf and the artificial turf field and track resurfacing, and that did not make it through last night, and neither did the upgrades to the locker rooms and shower facilities here, which a lot of effort has gone into both projects. And you're one of those things that, with both of them, they should have been done years ago. It's one of those things where the longer you put it off, the more expensive it is, and the more you've missed opportunities to provide, things that the public wants and needs.
Didn't we gave $75,000 to do a study for the locker rooms, and
Yes.
did we ever see that report?
Yeah, and it's a terrible story too, because they came back and we said, hallelujah, it's under $1 million. We could have a town meeting and it's all great. And then we discovered that the people who did the study didn't use prevailing wage. So when they plugged in the right wage numbers, the cost went up to $1.425 million.
Isn't that like a 1,500 square foot space?
What's that?
Isn't it like 1,500 square foot space?
About 5,000.
How many times, it's 5,000 square feet?
Yeah, it's bigger than that.
5,000 square feet.
Yeah.
Plus, the project also includes the entryway to have bathrooms available for people that use it out front.
What's the total amount of, how many new bathrooms are you adding? Do you have any idea,
We're
the
adding
amount?
2 new full bathrooms to the front.
With how many fixtures?
I think there's gonna be 2 to 3 in the front entrance by the GP room, and the bathrooms in the locker rooms should have, I believe, two bathrooms and 2 urinals in the men's room with full showers, 4 full showers in the ladies' room with 3 to 4 toilets.
It's more than a park and rec facility, because this building is the primary emergency shelter, which, thank God, we haven't had to use since 2012. But in 2011 and 2012, for Hurricanes Irene and Sandy, we had a lot of people in here for a good 10 days. And if you really want to treat come and make an appointment with Eileen if you have time during the day and have her show you those showers.
We went there.
We went,
Oh,
we
did you
had,
go?
oh yes, we had a guided tour, it
It
was
just-
very remarkable.
I'm not questioning the need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, when you start talking about 1.5 million, it might be cheaper to do an addition. I mean, at that point, find
Yeah,
a
we
spot
just
off,
talked about it.
the gym or something. It's just, it's,
So
what'd you
how do
say?
you get around the prevailing wage? How do you get
Yeah.
around that? You don't,
Yeah.
so, I mean, it's like.
Unless you could bring the
Twice.
project in under 500,000.
Yeah.
Well, it has to be under
What's the number?
$100,000.
Renovation.
Renovation.
Over 100,000, it goes prevailing wage.
What about new construction? What's prevailing
Million
wage?
dollars.
Million on new
Million.
This isn't new.
The problem is that in some cases, Department of Labor will say if you're building an addition on an existing building, they'll call that a renovation and slap you with the 100,000 limit.
Well, I'm sorry, if this is not new information, then the person, whoever the company is that did the study, like, do we still have $75,000 in the bank? Because they shouldn't get paid.
Well, they just
In my
adjusted
humble
the
opinion.
number. I mean,
Huh?
it's still a workable plan.
Right, but if they did a study and didn't take into consideration a very vital piece of information, that would make me suspicious of the whole study. That's just me.
But it's more, you were talking about doing skylights in the entryway and
Oh, you know,
wasn't
We
that-
that?
adjusted all those
Yeah.
with the architect
With
drawing.
your architects? But you're
I
still,
mean, if you would like, I can do a full presentation that I could have ready to go. I tried to do, when I did my budget presentation, to give you a partial one, but it was 10:15 at night
that
when
was
I
at
presented
school.
my
No
budget.
wonder I don't
I
remember.
So,
apologize.
But they-
we do have a full range of new drawings,
Mhm.
and the public building and site could do a presentation for you guys.
Well, why don't we do that? Why don't we schedule Eileen to come to a Board of Finance meeting to make that presentation?
I'd like to
Not-
see the plans and see exactly
Yes,
exactly
Yeah,
what
'cause-
we're talking about.
Because the expensive stuff was taken out a long time ago.
Yeah, I remember.
That was where the 75,000.
Still sounds like there's a lot of expensive
We're not
stuff.
gonna settle anything on it tonight, so
Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
kind of move on to the next.
I had a question on the high school boilers.
Yes.
Knowing that we've had to do some replacement emergency boilers in the past, do we feel that the high school boilers are okay?
Well,
Loaded question.
yes, I will defer to Dr. Carver because we did speak about
So
that.
they are from circa 1970, I believe. They did
really?
had the combustion out in the past month, and they were able to make some repairs.
Okay.
And the owner of Connecticut Combustion feels that he can get another 2 years out of that based on.
Fingers crossed. and-
Yeah, the adjustments he's made. Now, you know that there's 3 boilers, so it's only the middle boiler that had the issue this year. He did open heart surgery on it and made those changes, and we think we bought some time.
Sounds good.
Are you gonna talk about the turf field a little bit more?
Yeah, what I wanted to say, we have allowed, this is a special meeting, we don't have public input, we have, we call on staff to answer questions, which is perfectly appropriate, but I did want to speak a little bit on behalf of the turf field. I'm not being critical of my colleagues in any way, because I understand we have a lot of financial pressures to deal with right now. But the turf field, it's not only just a matter of providing more opportunities for the kids. It goes above and beyond that. When you don't have to deal with grass, your watering costs go down, chemical costs go down, certain maintenance costs go up. If you remember from the superintendent's presentation last year, there's a revenue plan designed to maintain that field and take that financial burden off. So even though there's an upfront cost to doing so, in the long run, the ongoing operational costs go down as opposed to grass. With an artificial field, you can schedule it literally 10 times more often, more hours. So literally, you don't have to have that resting period when there's a rainstorm for fear of ripping up the grass. It's getting more to the point where it's probably getting to the point where I'm just going to guess, this is a personal opinion, but we are already at a point where if any of our high school teams make it to state playoffs, they can't hold that game here, which is it's a lost revenue opportunity and of course inconvenient for the parents. But it could get to the point, maybe in the future, where, you know, other teams won't come here. We already have marching bands that won't come here, because if it's wet and the grass is slick, they don't want the kids to fall down and get hurt. So, this is a good price. Not only is it relatively inexpensive, I'm not gonna say close to $1 million is not expensive, but it includes resurfacing the track, which has to happen anyway within the next year or two. So, I'm a supporter of both of those projects.
What are
And
the
I-
contractual agreements with Coach Grimes? When she did the track,
Yeah,
she said you need to do the maintenance on this,
Correct.
right? So do we have a signed contract with her? Like, what,
no,
it was just a handshake agreement
Yes.
to say we
It
would
was
do the
a,
maintenance?
it was a
Correct.
promise made to her.
It was a
though,
promise.
Verbal. You know, as part, I wasn't here, but I believe that was always the understanding, that she would invest in the project, and that we would invest in the upkeep of the condition of the track.
It would be part of our capital plan. That was the agreement that we did it would be part of our ongoing capital plan to maintain the track and do a resurfacing when time allowed.
So are we past the time when we
No,
should have done?
we're about a year,
Mark, am I wrong? Are we
right,
past-
we're about a year or two.
Well, I talked with Yvonne yesterday, and she said it's this year or next year when it has to be
Right.
done.
It's at a 10-year level,
Yeah.
so.
I don't remember the exact amount, but at the Board of Education presentation, I thought Terry Yansky said the board was prepared to give over $800,000 back to the town this year. I thought was the number.
That was our commitment, because, and that's through holding back because of the loss of revenue for ECS.
So what's the total number?
It was 881,000.
800, so
Outside of the
Yeah.
8K.
881,000 is gonna come back to the general fund.
Correct. I don't know where it goes, but that was.
Does that go to the general fund, Bob?
Goes to the general fund.
And where do we stand right now in the general fund over roughly
15 million.
15 million?
Can I just add that we're really still committed, I provided to Mr. Manfreda tonight, with our proposal for the turf replacement. We were set to go
Yeah,
last year.
we have it.
Yes, we're set to go this year. So whether or not, you know, a commitment to use it to help offset the cost, or for the replacement fund, we're actively, we are 100% on board for that.
What I asked for, and I mean, I see that you have these sponsorship opportunities, and that's fine. But what I really wanted to know was the neighboring towns.
Wilton raised $18,000 last year.
Well, I mean, the cost versus the revenue. Do you know what I'm getting at? It's,
So,
I just want to see how successful it is in other.
Yeah, so it's really hard, Cynthia, because every town handles it differently.
Okay.
So for example, New Milford builds into their pay to play, athletes fee of like $5 a kid, and then they put it into the fund. We talked about that when we presented, it's been a long time, but last spring. And I think everybody was clear, we didn't want to increase pay to play for a turf fund. In some towns like Wilton, uses it specifically to develop revenue for it. In some communities, park and rec departments and programs take a lot of it. I let Mr. Manfreda know that some of the information, it's not only going to the school, but you go to the town and the rec department. So Mark is trying to gather that, but it's not as
Okay.
easy as like just picking up the phone to the AD in that community and
I
getting that
understand.
information. So he's working on it.
So this sponsorship sheet,
Yes.
is this something that you've done in other areas where you have sponsors in it? You have
Yeah.
successfully done this type of structure?
Yes, so if you've been to the athletic fields,
Mhm,
you'll
I
see
actually
famous
have.
pizza, and you'll see a lot of things. And we talked about shifting it, and we talked about it being, I think, a 10-year cycle for sponsorship. So if you picked a silver sponsorship, it would go for 10 years. We would put that revenue into a fund that would be used, our plan was, as part of the turf replacement process. So the sponsorship would only be a certain period of time. If you wanted to renew, you could at that point, at the different levels.
And just so that you know, Dr. Carver, that information has been shared with the board.
Yeah.
What is the cost approximate? The breakdown here where half is the, not half, a portion is the track resurfacing and then the other half is.
131,000.
130 is the track resurfacing, and it was 770 around for the project itself, the turf and the GC.
And some of the members did ask, and I'm gonna get it a little early, how much would it cost if we just did the track? It's not not gonna be a lot more, but it'll be slightly more, but Mark is gonna get the estimates.
The significant savings is gonna be the fact that your GC and Field Turf held their
We
price.
do it all for you.
And we had an amazing price to begin with, which was assured to us by Long Brook because of when we went out to bid, it was early in the season, and they wanted our field to be the showcase field, so they gave us a great price.
So when is that proposal valid until, and when does this work have to get done seasonally?
They've held it through the summer, the actual cost.
And how, so it would have to be done during the summer to be ready for fall and play?
And I think after, if I'm not wrong, after school got out
Yeah, you
and
would
done
have
the
to-
athletic season.
You would have to start in June, because
Yeah.
you're talking about a 6 or 8 week
Yeah.
time frame, and then to do all the prep work and then to lay the turf, to have it ready for football season.
It should be plenty of time. I think.
Yeah, if you do it right at, come June, 1st of July. But if you wait any longer than that, you're gonna run into where the beginning of the season's gonna be.
I think it's important to note too that, you know, I'm sure some of the public has some concerns about crumb rubber. That's not an option. We're
No,
using
keep it organic.
The coconut.
we're
I think
using
you know
safe,
that.
organic infill.
I know so much about that cork, I'm not.
Eileen, have you guys looked at any possible revenue from the turf field on a Parks and Rec end?
Oh, I mean, a turf field would generate a lot of, a lot of extra revenue for my department itself, and could generate revenue that could go into a turf
Do you-
replacement fund.
Do you,
I thought we put that.
Why,
in.
but I,
You did.
Okay.
well, I don't know if that was combined with Parks and Rec.
I thought I broke it out, but I could be wrong. Yeah.
I
It
think
was-
it's together.
It's
But
together.
yeah.
And I thought the idea was we would put it in a fund that would be used only for the replacement of the turf down the road, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. Like, you could offer camps, you could offer adult programming at night, you could it's gonna take a while to get the benefits of
Correct.
having the turf field, to reach a lot of people. The benefit right away will be the high school
Our
sports.
students.
And it's us working the schedules out so that we could benefit adults having some programs and the youth leagues using it and the youth, you know, and being able to run, besides the one soccer tournament we do in October, running another type of tournament, lacrosse tournaments or
So
whatever the case may be.
you would run, basically, you'd have 15,000 left over each year to put into a fund for what has to get resurfaced every 10 years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's the average cost?
10 to 12.
10 to
What's
12.
the average cost now of resurfacing?
Current market 400,000.
Yeah.
400,000. So do you guys have a,
40 grand.
do you guys have a plan to come up with the balance?
We talked about part of it being through renewed sponsorship, so through the advertising. And I think we were at least estimating that we could probably generate up to close to $100,000.
Correct.
Just with the advertising, based on the sponsorship, similar we were talking about.
And we're still 150
We
short.
talked about working with Park and Rec for the revenue piece of it, so Mark's right, we'd have to come up with at least $40,000 a year to be able to put into a special fund to be able to offset the cost of it, so it's something that we'd have to address.
Christine, when you say offset the cost of it,
Of the replacement.
the replacement, is there a way for any additional income that comes in, or any fundraising monies, or, you know, additional park and rec income, where we could essentially like split that and put half towards the cost of the project and half towards the future upkeep of it?
I think we'd be open to any conversation,
know,
quite
I mean,
frankly.
I don't
So you're
know.
saying to try to do some initial fundraising and or advertisement to offset the cost of the project, that's what I'm hearing, and then maybe to look at developing a plan to help offset the cost of the long-term
Right.
maintenance of it. I think we're open to the discussion on how we can make that work. I mean, we've gotta be realistic. I think you know me, that I'm not gonna throw things out there that aren't realistic.
Sure.
But I definitely think we could, put our heads together and come up with some ideas.
I mean, realistically, for fundraising, I mean, we're not talking like,
No.
we don't want $20. We want somebody to invest.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe we could partner with All Sports Booster.
Yes, All Sports Booster Club has agreed to a $4,000 annual donation.
Yeah.
We're gonna be able to host more SWC events, so our concession gate our gate and concession is gonna go up. Pop Warner has offered $1,500 annually. So in the plan, we were there.
Have you guys looked at the inflation though, in terms of it's 400,000 now?
You're right.
10 years out, where would you put that number?
I mean, our hope is that our fund, that whatever money we're putting it into the fund is gonna keep up with inflation.
You know, it's such a hard question to answer. I mean,
Well, no, listen, I understand the importance of a turf field, and I know we'll deliberate it another night. It's just making sure that we could sustain it without an added burden, you know, to an already stressed,
Okay.
you know,
Paul, I
budget.
think- Did you have a question,
Dr.
Paul?
Carver?
No, he answered my question.
Yeah, just, I know I don't look very athletic, but I did play a lot of softball back in the day. But here's where I get stuck, is that when this was originally presented, it was going to be a referendum item. And is that because it was over $1 million?
no, I think it was tiny.
Right.
So, am I wrong?
Well, let me finish. Let me just finish. So for me, I would be much more apt to go with it as a public vote than to put it in the capital plan. And that's just because then you get more of a scope of the town, their opinion on it, you know? And that's just how I feel. Like, I would be more apt to vote it to go to referendum. And so go through a process.
Cynthia, I think that's gonna be part of our deliberation tomorrow.
Okay.
Right,
Yeah, I don't wanna jump the gun. All right.
You're not wrong, though. Some time ago, it was gonna be combined with the locker rooms
Mhm.
as one which would be over $1 million, so it'd be a referendum.
Right,
for the
that's
two.
what I was getting at.
That's what you're probably remembering.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
and I think that last time it was the timing too, if I'm not wrong, because we had to do, we had to have the loan and room out, look at the conditions of the field, and really get an in-depth, like, kind of what we're getting into. So when it was past the budget season, when we got that information.
Right, but didn't we allot a certain amount of money like we did with the
Yes.
locker rooms? Yeah, okay,
The
that's what I
board-
thought, like 40,000 or
Yes, the
something?
board, sponsored.
It was 40.
No, I believe she's right, it was 40.
Thank you.
I'm not
Okay.
concerned so much about future costs of the field, because I think as a community, we have future costs and upkeep to anything. I would just like to see more fundraising or more, you know, so we know, not that it would work, because I believe that it makes sense to have this, but any possible way to lessen the cost.
And I think, Attorney Waller is not here, but I thought when it goes to referendum on an item, you have to do it for the full amount.
You do.
Okay. So, but with the understanding that we would be able to fundraise a certain degree of that. Is that what you're saying?
Pretty
Okay, I
much.
just want to be clear about what you're asking.
You know, if there's even possibilities. of
Yeah,
it.
so if we could fundraise or advertise for $200,000 worth of that cost, then you'd like to consider that as not just a replacement, is that what I hear you saying?
Yeah, to me, replacement or upkeep costs are going to be upkeep costs regardless of whether it's a turf field or whether it's a park and rec field. You know, that's just going to happen. We're gonna need those regardless. But, you know, just the field.
If I may make a comment, one of the things that we are recognizing and accepting is the demographic changes that are occurring in this town. And you can go and look at what is being built and who that will attract. And we are already hearing that we're looking for not only restaurants and convenient transportation, but recreational facilities. And Matt has put forth a need to address that a little bit more forthrightly if we intend to have people come in and fill all the places that are being built. But we don't envision this turf field as just a school facility. There are people that have already come forward when we were originally talking about this, saying we'd like to use it at night. And it would be a co-ed tag football game or frisbee golf or what have you. So those are all fundraising opportunities to help pay for what we're talking about. If you have to build a person, they'll come.
I think that it was perhaps a really, a good thing that the Board of Selectmen took it out, and even if we don't include it in the budget, that doesn't mean that we can't consider it off budget.
as a lawyer.
Right. So, if you have, I'm just throwing this out there, if you have the $880,000 that you would intend to give back to the from your, whatever, to the fund, wouldn't that be available to partially cover?
Well, you remember.
I don't know, I'm just trying,
I would love that.
I mean, I'll write you a check right now, if it
No,
were to
but
me,
you gotta
if I had
remember
it.
that we're losing a certain amount of revenue
Correct.
from the state, so that's gonna make up that shortfall.
Right, but then you were on camera, because Terry was waving you around on her iPhone, that you were up testifying.
I was testifying yesterday.
Right, so-
Yes, I was in Hartford testifying for two things. One is for the projects, because our Johnson and Rockwell projects are being considered, so that was one reason I was testifying. And then I was testifying about the impact of ECS.
ECS.
And so, you know, I don't think ECS is totally dead. I talked to Tony Boucher and Representative Harding and Mike McLaughlin. They're actually really trying to restore some of those things. So I can't promise you that it's gonna be there, but there is some hope out there that some of that money will be restored.
Bob, can you just explain, so when we took the cut, they held off hiring positions and whatnot,
Yes, we went over that during the budget.
which saved $800,000, and the town, I believe, kicked in some too, correct? You guys tightened the belt. So they hired those positions right
Not all of
now.
them, but yes.
Some of those positions. So does the 880,000 go to cover bills that we're gonna be short on, or is it still gonna be a surplus, is my question? Like, are we ahead or are we behind, right now?
I mean, part of that also is a reduction in medical costs because you
Yes.
switched over to the partnership plan. So there's a reduction there.
But I guess my question is, though, are we, without that money, where do we stand in terms of our budget? Would we have a shortfall on that fiscal year? Or would we be?
I think the answer is,
I think when it
the
comes-
answer is we don't know yet, right? We
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
understand the entire budget to see where our surplus is. Cash is going to be fungible. The source of it doesn't necessarily.
I'm not talking about next year's budget, I'm talking about,
This
this year, to
Yeah.
find out, where we're at in terms of.
Right, but we won't know where we are at the end of fiscal year 18
Right.
until it's closed. So it's not as if we've got.
No, and I'm sure Bob has a pretty good
But I
Still have a
idea
lot of
of whether we're looking good or whether we're looking
If
bad.
there's a surplus like we've had in prior years, on a revenue side, we won't have that, that surplus this year because we're losing the revenue from the state.
Yeah.
But there's hope, and then there's, I hate that word hope, everyone knows that, but just as far as, we don't know. You seem hopeful, you're saying we're not getting it.
No, my point is we're not going to know
Right.
until we're in fiscal year 19, right? Because we need fiscal year 18 to close. To me, we're going to have to deliberate on this tomorrow, understand all the moving parts, and
But I think
figure
we're
out what we
talking
want
about
to
two
do.
different issues
We
right
may be,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Two different issues.
So,
the state and the,
Yeah, the state's on the revenue side and then
Yeah.
our
I'm more
expense.
worried about our bills.
So my recommendation would be, unless there's more questions on the Board of Finance, that we're ready to close on your comments, Matt, regarding the capital, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, let me just make a closing comment. First of all, I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. We appreciate your silent comments. I can hear you thinking. I want to thank my two colleagues. The three of us and the seven of you, every year at this time, find yourself between a rock and a hard place. And every year the rocks get bigger and the hard places get harder. And this, this $7 million worth of deferred important stuff that we want to do is just a red flag to me. But it's not easy. We find ourselves falling off some Christmas card lists every once in a while. But thank you for your judgment and your counsel. I appreciate it. We work as a team and we do our best to provide the things that our residents want to have. So, and I wish you the best of luck in your deliberations, because we're out of the rock and the hard place and you aren't. So.
It's all opportunities.
That's right.
We have opportunities.
It could come back to you.
And just so you know, I'm an optimist. I'm one of the hopeful ones. I don't think we're gonna get it all back in ECS, but, you know, I think we can find ways to provide the things that our residents want to have.
And I bet you get way more Christmas cards than I do.
Just to let folks know what the process is from here, we will meet, the Board of Finance meets tomorrow for deliberation, and if necessary, we will meet Thursday, March 1st as well. The idea is then for the Board of Finance to come up with a discussion suggestion for purposes of the public hearing, March 20th, I believe.
March 20th, correct.
Right.
So there's information to be gathered between now and March 20th. That will be the next opportunity for public comment on what the Board of Finance will recommend to the town. And with that, entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We're done.
What time is our meeting tomorrow? 6:30?
6:30?
May, like you,
Brian.
if we have a question for you or Harry.
Well, I understand. So take your point. It's approximate. We won't know until
Right.
sometime in October.
Based on tax collections, you can make an educated projection. I look at my